I am Bruce Bloom, the Chief Science Officer at Kabuki Syndrome Foundation. For those of you who might have missed me during my earlier talk this morning, I'm going to kick off a session about therapies in development. And to do that, I'm first going to share my screen just to give you a quick overview. So we're going to hear from several of the principal investigators or companies that are either currently doing some research in clinical care or are on the horizon to do that in the near term. So right now, we're going to hear in a minute from Michael Ropacki from Oryzon about the clinical trial for vafidemstat that hopefully will kick off sometime in 2024 if everything aligns well. And that is a molecule that has been tested in humans in other diseases. And it's a molecule that has been tested in animal models of Kabuki syndrome or like similar molecules that have shown a real impact. We're going to hear from Jackie Harris, who's going to talk to us a little bit about the ongoing work that's being done for the ketogenic diet and the impact that that's having. We're going to hear from Sally Trewartha from Kabuki UK, who is going to talk to us. So we're definitely talking about candidates, and we talked this morning about Kabuki KSOC, the Outcome Measure and Biomarker Consortium, so that we're doing those things so that we can move these further along. So if you go to the next slide, this is the current pipeline. So as I said, we're going to hear from Jackie about the modified Atkins diet and from Michael about vafidemstat. We've also been working with Kasturi Halder at Notre Dame about a molecule that needs to get advanced, and there's a couple of companies interested in doing that. Olaf Bodemer at Boston Children's is doing some screening and has some candidates that he's found of already approved drugs. There's a team in Trento in Italy that is working on some ATR inhibitors, and then there's a number of others. And as I said, we're also going to hear from Sally Trewartha from Kabuki UK, who's going to talk to us about some international cooperation that we're doing. So we're really excited to hear from these panelists. And so I'm going to turn the presentation over to Michael, and hopefully he'll have better success at getting his slides up than I did.
So I just wanted to thank the Kabuki Syndrome Foundation, Kabuki UK, and everybody on the line today for the opportunity to present to you about where we stand on the HOPE trial. And HOPE is a double-blind, randomized, placebo-controlled, multi-center phase 1/2 trial to evaluate the efficacy and safety of vafidemstat in subjects with Kabuki syndrome. And let's just trying to make sure. Okay, this is a public disclosure saying that we're a publicly traded company. And so let's start here. This is lysine LSD1 is an epigenetic enzyme, and it's involved with various CNS disorders. Okay, and vafidemstat as an epigenetic therapy has some control over the critical gene expression and the function through this targeted pharmacological intervention. And specifically, VAFI is a selective LSD1 inhibitor. And I'm trying to get my build slides to work here. So LSD1 is the most abundant histone demethylase in the prefrontal cortex, the front of your brain, if you will. It plays a critical role in neurogenesis, which is the birth and growth of the neurons, and the regulation of cortical development or brain development. It localizes to enhancers and promoters of confirmed CNS disease risk genes. So what that means is that it has been identified to play a role in a number of different disorders in the genes that are affected in these disorders, including Kabuki syndrome. And it results in methylation imbalances. And specifically, that's where we are with Kabuki syndrome as a neurodevelopmental disease. And some of these mutations can be reversed by therapy. And you're going to see a little bit about that in the upcoming slides. So vafidemstat is our LSD1 inhibitor, and it has demonstrated safety and tolerability in various disorders. We've had 7 different human trials. Patients have been treated on continuous vafidemstat therapy for over 18 months. 400, if I didn't mention that, subjects to date. And as of this morning, we just had a press release that our largest trial to date, Portico, had last patient last visit. So we're very excited about that. So this is kind of a graphic to put it in perspective with you. So most of you on here understand what Kabuki syndrome is, obviously. And so what you have on the left here is like a scale graphic, and this is what you would see in a normal phenotype. In the Kabuki phenotype, you see in the middle where you have an overabundance, say, on the right-hand side of the scale. And so by propping up that side of the scale, if you will, with this LSD1 inhibitor here, it restores the balance, and it creates a restored normal phenotype. So evidence to support this is from some mice models, and this is from an article where Zhang is the lead author in 2021, where LSD inhibition restored this methylation imbalance in the hippocampus, which is involved with learning and memory in humans. It rescued this adult neurogenesis, so the neurons regrowth. It helped restore how the neurons look and function, rescued global gene expression changes. It rescued visual spatial learning and memory, and specifically for splenomegaly, it rescued immune deficits that were involved in the mice that have knockout mice with Kabuki syndrome. And on the right, what you see is the vehicle, if you will, in the top left here, and then in the bottom, you see the LSD1 inhibition on the bottom left and right. So this is just showing you graphically, and I believe these are the hippocampus blown up, and showing how the drug has induced the neurogenesis. So now, speaking of hope, so it's an adaptive randomized double-blind phase 1/2 trial. The phase 1 objectives are just to make sure that it's safe and tolerable in adolescents, because although we've done 7 trials, we've never done trials in anyone under the age of 18. So what you do is you do a very controlled trial in a small number of placebo and patients treated with drug subjects, and you either dose escalate or you dose de-escalate, and you try to find the dose that is safe and tolerable in the population. So that's the objective of phase 1. Phase 2 in the adults is to use the 1.2 milligram dose, which is what we've used in the majority of our trials to date. We expect to have the IND was expected in the second half of 2023. I think this didn't get updated. The first patient is expected in the first quarter of 2025. And this sets up us for expedited development if we can demonstrate a clinical benefit in Kabuki kids with Kabuki syndrome and adults. So updates on the trial. It's a hybridized trial, so it's going to only require that you come to the doctor's office 3 times. All other visits are going to be done in your home or a clinic nearby. Trial will be about a half a year. At the beginning of the trial, you'll have a couple of visits, then you'll have one at the end. Those are the in-person ones. They're more frequent in the beginning because that's where we're making sure that the dose is safe for the affected patients. The 2 phases in different age ranges, I've mentioned phase 1 is in 12 to less than 18, and phase 2 is 18 to 25. All procedures for the adolescents and patients, adults, are identical, and the time involved in the trial is the same for both. So here's where we were last year. Last year, we identified US sites, and Dr. Jackie Harris is going to be the PI. Other sites and doctors have been identified that are specializing in the treatment. A number of them are presenters at this conference here. We had contracted with all the companies. We got everything lined up and ready to go. But we also received feedback from Kabuki Syndrome Foundation and Kabuki UK that they would like to see some more animal research and knockout Kabuki syndrome animals. And so where we're at in 2023 is that we've agreed, and we have been in discussions with Dr. Sid Banca, and he may be a presenter this year here as well, about taking this trial and making it more of a global trial. And we also have considerations for other European countries. We had to switch out our vendors because the vendors we had identified could work in the US, but not outside of the US. So we went through an additional request for proposal process, and we got down to bid defenses, and we selected more collaborators or companies that are going to work with us to make this a global trial, which was something we alluded to as a potential last year, and now it's a reality. And we are planning to do additional research, and as my understanding, there has been some collaboration between Oryzon and Dr. Banca's lab in provision of some drug. And we're in discussions with Kabuki Syndrome Foundation and Kabuki UK to help develop some educational materials for everyone, all the families and loved ones on this call. And those discussions are ongoing. And of course, we still have need for additional funding. So the IND application is going to be filed in the second half of 2024. That was a typo in an earlier slide. Apologies for that. The first patient now is expected to be in the first quarter of 2025. The overall goals of phase 1, again, are to establish the safety in adolescents and determine the right dose. And in phase 2, determine if this treatment improves cognitive abilities, mood, including things like anxiousness or anxiety, as well as overall functioning, and establish the safety profile in patients with Kabuki syndrome. So with that, I will stop. I don't know if we're doing questions. We're doing panel questions later, so I will hold off on questions and turn it over. And with that, I'd like to have the pleasure to introduce Sally, who is the head of Kabuki UK.
Yeah, I'm Sally Trewartha. I'm chairperson of Kabuki UK. It's amazing to be here with you all. I've got some slides to share, so I'm just gonna pull. It's wonderful to be with you all. We first founded Kabuki UK nearly 15 years ago with a group of about 5 babies together in the lounge of one of our trustees. Our only aim at the time was to connect people, to connect families with other families, so that they didn't feel lonely and they could share their experiences. Since then, we've built a thriving community, and we all come together at our family day each year in the summer, and our members are growing up together. That was us this summer, with some documentation that KSF kindly supplied, so that we can kind of keep this conversation going amongst our members. Back when we formed the charity, there was precious little information on the genetics, almost no research, and we didn't really even dare dream of the idea of possible drug treatments. And now I find myself on calls with the international research community, and everything seems to be moving so fast. We've been hearing today about KSOC, and I'm excited to say that my son Harry and I will be travelling from the UK in the near future to take part in that. And I'm looking forward to sharing our experience of doing that with the whole community on our social media. We're going to document our journey so that you can all see what it's like. We can see by the numbers on Kabuki Count that we really are a worldwide community, and one which all has the same goal, to do the best by our loved ones. So I really urge people, wherever you are, to get involved with the group in your country. I can guarantee you that the people running those groups need your help. I know we do at Kabuki UK. It's so important that we work together because the strength is in numbers. Across Europe, there are Kabuki advocacy groups now. I'm so excited to work together in the future, and seeing all of those logos together on Kabuki Count. It sends such a strong message. And I would like to invite all of the European groups, and anyone else, but especially the European groups, to an event that we have coming up next year here in the UK in Manchester. On March the 16th, we will be holding our second Kabuki UK Information Day. It will be a whole day of presentations and discussions with experts and researchers on all aspects of Kabuki. That is a picture of our last one back in 2019. My hair was a different colour. I'm really happy to say that we'll have Michael from Oryzon with us, speaking about opportunities to participate in the HOPE trial. And there'll be presentations from a lot of the people that you've seen speak here today, including Clara and Bruce and Sid. The information on how to get to that event is on our social media, on our Facebook page. There's a form there for pre-registration, and the full registration will be going out shortly. But if you do the pre-registration, you'll get all the information in due course. With Kabuki UK, I really feel like we're moving into a new phase. We're no longer just helping build a community of families. We already are a community. And the charity can now be the bridge between that community and the scientific community, so that we can all move forward together. And I hope that that next phase of the charity will be, I feel like it's just going to be so exciting, and that we're going to be able to bring this messaging clearly to our membership. And I really hope that everybody around the world sort of watches this space, because in 15 years of running this charity, things have never been moving this fast before. And I'm so excited and so hopeful for these trials. And it really moves me, actually, when I hear all of the minds and the brain power that's going into finding out more about the syndrome and ultimately to help our community. So once again, thank you to everybody. And with that bridge in mind, I'm going to hand over to Dr. Jacqueline Harris at Kennedy Krieger.
Thank you so much, Sally. Can everybody hear me and see my slides?
Yes.
Great. So I'm going to give you all a very brief update. So anybody who's just joining this conference now, hi, I'm Jackie Harris. I am an associate professor of neurology and genetics at Kennedy Krieger and Johns Hopkins in Baltimore. And I'm going to talk to you right now briefly about the modified Atkins diet clinical trial we've been doing in adults with Kabuki syndrome and where we hope this research to go next. Okay, there we go. So Kabuki syndrome, as you all have heard throughout the day, is caused by this epigenetic imbalance. And this is Hans Bjornson's slide, so thank you, Hans. But we hope that with epigenetic modification, that we can restore this balance between closed and open chromatin. So this figure is very similar to what you saw Michael Ropacki present earlier, which is basically that we're looking at all these epigenetic therapies to try and restore this balance that we see imbalanced in Kabuki syndrome. And so in the idea behind the diet trial is that when you are on a ketogenic diet, you produce these things called ketone bodies. And one of the main ketone bodies that is produced when on a ketone diet is called beta hydroxybutyrate. And as it turns out, beta hydroxybutyrate has this epigenetic function. We call it, in this case, the epigenetic function is called a histone deacetylase inhibitor, which have been published now numerous times to correct the phenotype in Kabuki syndrome mice. And so when you're on a ketogenic diet, beta hydroxybutyrate is produced. Beta hydroxybutyrate has this function called HDAC inhibition, and HDAC inhibition has been known to correct the phenotype or correct the cognitive problems in Kabuki syndrome mice. And what you see here from a 2017 paper from the Bjornson lab is that, in fact, in the mice, putting them on a ketogenic diet does also correct the cognitive and neurogenesis deficits that we see in these mice. So take that and move it away from Kabuki syndrome for a moment. And one other thing that we know is that a ketogenic diet is a therapy that has been used in neurology for a long time. And specifically, it's been used in seizures. However, a ketogenic diet has lots of side effects, and it is difficult to follow. So some wonderful investigators actually at Hopkins who study seizures thought about doing something called a modified Atkins diet, which is kind of an easier, less strenuous, less side effect version of a ketogenic diet. And what they saw is that you also get significant seizure improvement on this diet as well. So we thought, could we also, instead of putting patients on a full ketogenic diet that requires a lot of things and hassles and side effects, could we put them on this modified Atkins diet and also see these high beta hydroxybutyrate levels and a good effect in Kabuki syndrome? So what you see is a ketogenic diet is on the far left. It's 90% fats, a little bit of proteins, and almost no carbohydrates. A modified Atkins diet is still primarily fats, but you're much less restricted in proteins, and you're mainly just carbohydrate restricting, whereas a standard diet is actually usually primarily carbohydrates. And so we did a pilot study of this modified Atkins diet in adults with Kabuki syndrome. So the adults would come in, they'd get a blood draw and some education on the diet. They'd get cognitive and behavioral assessments, and then they'd go home and they'd do the diet for 12 weeks. They'd get blood drawn every 3 weeks. They'd pee on these little ketone sticks to monitor their ketones, and they'd keep diet logs. And then at the end of week 12, we brought them back to Baltimore, another blood draw and cognitive assessment, and then they were finished. And so the current status of this diet is that 10 adults have completed it. 2 are actively enrolled right now, and 1 is scheduled to come in and begin the diet in the next couple weeks. What we've seen so far, compliance and tolerance has been excellent. So better than we had expected, which we should have known because as you all family members know, and you all individuals with Kabuki syndrome know, is that people with Kabuki syndrome are great at following rules, right? If you give them a set of rules, they're really good at saying, I got to do this, I got to stick to this, this is what I got to do. So they did a fabulous job on this diet. We're getting beta hydroxybutyrate levels in these individuals that look like it is feasible to get the beta hydroxybutyrate levels to where we want them on a modified Atkins diet. And again, there are still people still actively on the diet and 1 still to start. So we don't have any actual numbers to show you at this point because that would bias the study. But so far, what we think and what we knew ahead of time is that 3 months is a little bit too short to see major cognitive changes. But the main goal of this study was to see feasibility, see if we could get these beta hydroxybutyrate in range, see if individuals would tolerate the study. And so far, so great. So our next steps beyond finishing this study in the next few months is to expand this modified Atkins diet trial to school-age children and allow them to stay on the diet for a whole 6 to 12 months, where we could actually anticipate seeing cognitive and behavioral changes. And then we're going to use, in this next phase of the trial, all of the outcome measures and biomarkers that you've heard about through KSOC. So we're going to use these cognitive and behavioral outcome measures, the same ones that we're going to be using or very similar, slightly different age groups, but very similar to the ones that we're going to be using in the HOPE trial as well. We're going to be using similar biomarkers that you all are going to help us to validate through KSOC. We actually have a source of funding to do this study at Kennedy Krieger and some other sites that looks very promising. So we think we're going to be able to. And then thanks to you all's feedback that you gave at a previous Kabuki syndrome conference, we're also looking at including an arm of exogenous ketones, which is giving beta hydroxybutyrate outside of the diet, or more likely in addition to a modified version of the diet, to really get to the levels that we want to see and test and minimize the side effects. And so that is my very brief overview of where we are on the diet trial. And I am turning it over to Jessica, I think.
Hi, everyone, and thank you so much, Dr. Harris. My name is Jessica, and I'm on the board of directors with the Kabuki Syndrome Foundation. It's a real delight to be here today, so thank you so much for having me. I have a little boy. His name is Aiden. He has bright red hair, and he has Kabuki syndrome. Aiden's only 2 years old, so we're very new in our Kabuki syndrome journey. And when Aiden was first diagnosed, he was about 6 months old. Now, I am a marketer, a digital marketer by trade. I don't know a lot about science, I'll be honest. I never studied it. I was never really interested in it. Sorry. But my husband, actually, he's in the biopharma industry and he has a degree in genetics. So when Aiden first received his diagnosis, my husband immediately went and started looking at what research was being done in the field of Kabuki syndrome. And he found the Kabuki Syndrome Foundation. Now, at the time, I didn't understand anything about, why we would want to get involved in research. It didn't make sense to me to involve Aiden in research. All that made sense to me was to enjoy this little boy and essentially bring him home from the hospital after a very prolonged stay at the beginning of life. But as time went on, I finally took my husband's advice and I looked at the KSF website. And what I saw on that KSF website was a group of people who were just like me, who were just like us. They were parents and they were loved ones of those who had Kabuki syndrome, and they were looking to make a difference through research. So it started to click. Everything started to make sense in my head. All of a sudden, I realized that, okay, if these people are trying to make a difference and they're trying to do it through research, there's got to be something in this research thing. And it all started to unwind for me, really. And we started going down the path of what research has already been done and discovering that actually huge strides were already made around Kabuki syndrome and understanding Kabuki syndrome. And there were specialists like Dr. Harris, who we've already heard from today, and other doctors in the field who have a genuine interest in studying this and who are already, running trials like the Atkins trial that we just heard Dr. Harris talk about. And I realized, okay, do you know what? Actually, we are the only ones who are going to make this happen. We, as the family members, as those with Kabuki syndrome and those who love someone with Kabuki syndrome, we are it. And oftentimes I think we look around in the world and we think, maybe I won't do this because what will one person make that big of a difference towards? But actually, in a community of rare disease, which is quite small, all of us can make a huge, significant difference, not just by participating in research, but also by accelerating research through donations. My husband and I are Canadian, but we live in the United Kingdom with our son, Aiden. And when we got involved with Kabuki Syndrome Foundation, we accelerated our entire network. We told our friends, we told our family, we told everyone, we sang from the hilltops about the amazing work that the foundation was doing with the experts in Kabuki syndrome and driving research forward. And now we've educated all of those people in our network. We've given them real life examples of the amazing things that are happening, like the HOPE trial, for example, a clinical trial that's due to start next year. It's really incredible. We got them all excited and we asked them to give. And this is what I urge you to do with your networks as well. Ask them to give, get them excited. We invest so much time and so much money in advocating for our children and our loved ones to get them the special education that they require, the special therapies that we require. And all that does is go to treat the symptoms, which is so important. It's what's right in front of us. But we can also advocate to treat Kabuki syndrome itself. We can also get involved to treat the root cause of what is creating the symptoms for our children and for our loved ones. So as a Canadian living in the UK, I'm really excited to announce that the Kabuki Syndrome Foundation has actually launched 2 different vehicles for those living in the United Kingdom and those living in Canada to donate via the KSF website and actually receive some tax relief on those donations. It's a really exciting time. As Sally put it, there's huge change happening at the moment. We're really going faster forward than we ever have before. And I'm really excited to be a part of this journey with you. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Jessica. Great. Thanks for all the speakers. We have some time for questions and answers, and I have a couple of questions here. The first one I'm going to direct towards Jackie. Jackie, can we try the modified Atkins diet on our own, or should this be monitored by a clinician?
You definitely need to have any specialized diet monitored by a clinician because even though it's lower risk than ketogenic diet, there are still side effects that can happen with modified Atkins diet or really any special diet that needs to be monitored. The other thing I will just emphasize is we do not have the scientific data that suggests that a modified Atkins diet is absolutely helpful. That's why we're trying to collect this data. And so I cannot say with any confidence at this point that this diet is going to be helpful for any given individual with Kabuki syndrome because we still have a lot of work to do to figure that out.
Thanks, Jackie. Next question for Dr. Ropacki. How many subjects will be needed for each phase of the HOPE trial? And if the first phase is testing adolescents with Kabuki syndrome to establish dosing, will this not also be hoped to have clinical impact, and will it be measured?
Great question. So the total sample size is planned at 60 for the overall trial. And the number that is needed in phase 1, the dose finding phase, it really depends on how well tolerated the drug is. If it's tolerated at the planned 1.2 milligram dose, we could enroll as little as 12 subjects in that, and we will be done. It could go as high as 36 subjects, depending upon whether we have to titrate down the dose and try different arms if there are any issues with tolerance of the drug as we're doing phase 1. There is no restriction on the numbers of patients going in. We would hope that, and no pun intended, that we would have a balance of adolescents and adults. I would like to see at least 50-50, so 30 of the adolescents and 30 of the adults, so that we can have a sufficient sample to do any sub-analyses on the data to see if the subgroups are performing differently.
And Michael, a quick follow-up to that. Will you be taking patients with both type 1 and type 2 Kabuki syndrome for the HOPE trial?
That also is a great question. We are focusing on type 2 because that's where we think that we have the best shot on goal. Jackie, you may want to have a comment on this, but
type 1.
I'm sorry, type 1. And that's where we believe we have the best shot on goal. but there would be plans in the future that if it does work in the type 1 population to do some follow-on work in the type 2. And sorry, I mixed the two up. The KMT2D, always the 2 there and the 1 confused me. So sorry about that.
No worries. We all have trouble with all the acronyms. That's great. Sally, a question for you. How many people typically attend your info day and where do they come from?
So we hosted one in 2019. We had 80 people at that one. We've got a much bigger venue for the one in 2024. So we've got 150 spaces and about 120 pre-registered already from all over the UK. But it's not limited to people from the UK. If you can travel, you're welcome. But we will be filming the whole day and making that available later. So that people can either watch back, because it will be a lot of information to take in on the day, or if they can't make it, they'll be able to get access to those videos later.
Thanks, Sally. Michael, another question for you. How will the Kabuki syndrome outcome measures and biomarkers consortium facilitate the HOPE trial, if at all?
So my understanding, and I have not been involved in the biomarker consortium, but from our discussions, Bruce and those with Janet and Sally, is that this consortium is already testing the same or very similar measures to what is being used in HOPE. So I actually think that this would be, from my understanding of it, a great facilitation, because you're enrolling more subjects than we're going to need in the HOPE trial. They're already going to be exposed to these measures. They're going to be identified. So if anything, if those subjects and their families are willing to not only be part of that, but then roll into the HOPE trial, this could facilitate how quickly the trial is enrolled and completes. Jackie, do you have anything to add to that?
I completely agree. Also, we are using the same biomarkers in the KSOC as in HOPE. And so right in HOPE, they are experimental kind of outcomes, right? Which means that we're looking at them, we're exploring them, we're seeing what they look like. But with KSOC and HOPE together, exactly what Michael was saying, with that increased power, then we can move those biomarkers towards becoming validated and having more impact on the outcome of HOPE.
Great. Well, I just want to thank the panelists. We're at time. We will answer the rest of the questions. Thank you to all the attendees for these great questions. There's another almost dozen questions, and we will answer those either in the breakout session or answer them on the website.